Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on staying sane. I get this question a lot in the comments. People ask me, how did you stay sane during the ordeal? I'm not sure that I was ever entirely sane. It is, it's tough. One of the things that I can remember was after I was able to get primary physical custody, it felt like there was this clamp on my skull that had been taken off. And I think I understood more about how much stress and pressure I was under then than I did the entire, I don't know, 5 or 6 years prior to having that custody designation. You don't really know sometimes what you were going through until after you're out of it. That's the weird thing about it. One of the things I want to do before I start on this video is mention a few updates. There were a few things that I promised working on and actually haven't stopped. One of those is the My Docket series. Another one is the Arnovatic Judges and Warped Course Studios accounting. And then the other is the comprehensive update of all the websites. What ended up happening is things kept getting reprioritized. So I ended up in a situation now where everything's almost done. The My Docket page is going to go up. It's 70% done. The accounting page will go up. That's about 95% done. And then the comprehensive update is also about 95% done. So it's one of those weird situations where I didn't work on everything one at a time. I worked on everything simultaneously. And you'll see a bunch of stuff coming out probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, just one after the other. I'll get those things deployed. It's a lot of work. Anyway, I was going to go ahead now and go into staying sane. Here's what I have to say about that. There's a quote. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and Google it right now. I found it. It's apparently it's called the Serenity quote. I'm looking over at it here on my other monitor, and apparently it reads like this: "Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference." And that last portion there is what's going to help you stay sane. If you can tell the difference between what you can and what you can't change, it's easier to get through the, I guess, crisis. And the reason why is a certain part of you will just kind of detach from it. It's like, yeah, this is a problem and it's horrible, but there's nothing I can do about it. And I don't want to kind of downplay the other side of that coin, which is to have the courage to try and change the things that you can. Because I think a lot of people are also missing out on that aspect of it. That's why I created the channel, because a lot of people, I felt, didn't know that they could change these things. A lot of people felt, well, if I don't have an attorney, I'm just going to lose. Well, if I don't have any money, I can't file appeals. None of that stuff is true. And educating people on these things helps people understand, wait a minute, I can change this. Then it just comes down to generating the courage you need to actually try and do it. But yes, telling the difference is a huge factor in staying sane. In fact, I even published a video on this called Giving Up. By the way, guys, never assume you know what a video is about just by its title. Yeah, it explains the approach of giving up, but there's so much more to that video. Sometimes I think people hear a video, they go with the title I've given them and they just assume, oh, okay, Alex is just telling me to give up. There's more to that video. It's just like the video Unauthorized Practice of Law. I send people that video all the time when they ask me questions that I can't give a response to, and I think a lot of people just think, oh, well, that means no. That video has a ton of stuff in it that is way more than just no. So please, if you get a video reference, whether it's something like Giving Up or Unauthorized Practice of Law, don't just assume that it's just like a 2-second video that says no or yes, or move on. There's a lot to these videos. Anyway, the biggest thing for me when I went through the high conflict child custody situation was, as I mentioned in that quote, when you know you can't change something, you just let it go. There is one more thing that I want to add to that is I honestly just put the blame on the system, because I felt like that was the truth of it. If this was what was going on with my son and I filed something and the judge didn't believe me, that's the judge's fault. If I didn't file anything, that would be my fault. Or my ex's fault. If I didn't go and gather the evidence, if I was just lazy, or if I didn't do the research, fine. I mean, that's just me being lame, I guess. But when I said, this is a problem, my child is suffering, this is a solution, and I went and actually filed something, and I went and actually gathered the evidence, and I went and actually attached all the evidence, and I did everything in my power that I could, including filing appeals, at some point, you've done everything you can as a parent. at some point you can't control anymore. And so it was, in my opinion, at that time, I felt like this is the judge's fault now. I've dumped this on them. I did that everything that I could to solve this problem. So if the government has poor laws in place, if they give too much discretion to the judges, it's the legislature's fault. It's the judge's fault. And it's really tough for me to say this in a video because a lot of people might think, well, that's just blame shifting. Blame shifting to me is when you just decide to shift the blame without actually doing anything about it. But there are sincere situations where people actually do put in all the hard work and they actually do try and solve problems, and for whatever reason some external force gets in the way of that. At that point in time, that's not the fault of the person anymore. They've done everything that they could. If there's a bad statute, that's the legislature's fault. If there's a judge that doesn't know what they're doing, they're incompetent, that's the judge's fault. That's it. So that helped me get through some of the tough situations. And as I explained in the video Giving Up, sometimes I would get a new thing that I could bring to the court's attention. So there would be several times when the judge would screw up. I'd say, well, I tried, the judge is the one that's at fault now. But then later on, my ex would do something new. And then I could at that point say, no, I've already decided it's everyone's fault but mine. But I didn't decide that. As I explained in the video Giving Up, I'll try again. I'll take that new thing and I'll try again. And that's one of the reasons why I ended up getting the outcome that I finally did. So, I mean, I did save my son from all of the abuse because of 8 years of litigation. I don't know how many filings, over 300 filings, 20 here. I don't know how many hearings. I lost count. It's all in the My Docket series if you want to watch it all. And that is something that I do take credit for because I was relentless. You know, over and over again, the judge would screw up. Bad statutes would get in the way of it. Bad legislation would get in the way of it. But then I would overcome some of these things sometimes. You know, I'd get a custodial designation change. I'd get Justice Michael Cherry of the Supreme Court to author an opinion rectifying legislative mistakes. And so, you know, through this journey, I mean, I was able to actually get the outcome that I needed and stayed sane by, in a way, almost talking to myself or working through some of these things in my own head. Like, you know, this is what I can do to save this child. This is what the government can do. And if I do my part and the government doesn't do theirs, and that's the government's fault, but I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to wait until I can try again. And sometimes you never get a chance to try again. Sometimes you're in a situation that you just can't get out of. That happens. And there's nothing that you can do but accept the reality of it, which is that you don't have the control. At some point in time, you don't have the control anymore. Some of us who are watching this channel are going to put in a ton of effort and they will prevail. Others are going to put in a ton of effort and they won't. And the secret to staying sane is understanding where your limit is. You know, I never said, okay, since it's the government's fault, I'm going to go ahead and create all of these Facebook attack groups and pages and blast the judge and all this crazy stuff. The reason why I didn't do that is because I didn't think it would be effective. And I explained why in the video targeting the judge that is not effective. I explain another side of that coin in the video targeting the lawyer. Both of those videos tell you not to do that because it's not effective. And I know that other people might say, well, you could have done that, but I'm not about doing stuff that isn't actually going to protect the child. If it's not going to protect the child, if it's just because you're angry or you're enraged or you want to speak out, you could do these things if you really want to, but that's just not what I personally think is constructive. Because I know a lot of people have said, you know, there's First Amendment protections behind all these other channels and groups that are attacking the judiciary and the legislature, and that's all fine. It's just not consistent with my approach. I don't have a problem with their approaches. I just don't talk about it on this channel because I don't think it's effective. I think it could just make things worse for people. So finding out what your limit is as to what you can do to change a situation can vary even in the sense of what your perspectives are about what's right and wrong. So with me, blasting the judge is not something that I would consider right, because all it's going to do is make your situation worse coming down the road. Later on, when you have to go and try and actually bring a meritorious issue to the court for the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, now your opponent and the attorney has all this new evidence that they can use against you, where you're attacking the judge or saying all these crazy things online. That's what I talk about in the video social media. So for me, trying to find out what is within the limits of your control is not so much as the actions that you can take to solve the problem, but also the actions that you can avoid to not make the problem worse. All of these things help you stay as sane as you possibly can. I'm never going to say they'll help you stay sane. They won't. They'll just reduce how bad it feels to go through that situation. Basically, any person who cares about their child is in a way being tortured because their child is continuously suffering and nobody's doing anything about it to help them. And when they try and take actions to stop it, it just falls on deaf ears, or even worse, there's attorney fee sanctions. In fact, before I end this video, I am going to talk about that. I have done a little bit of reading up on parents who kill themselves. Mainly it's fathers, and I guess there's a big correlation with military fathers. I am not convinced that this is just occurring because of unfairness in the court system in the general sense. I have very strong suspicions that it has to do with financially annihilating this person. And this is not something that I went through in my case. And I give a lot of credit to the legislature, I think the pre-2015 legislature, for that, because they had enacted statutes that made it very difficult to collect attorney fees. The situation has changed now, and so it's going to get a lot worse in Nevada until that statute is repealed, if it ever is. It's a lot easier to award attorney fees now than it was then. And there's a ton of abuse of discretion that goes into these attorney fee awards. They're getting overturned left and right because judges aren't following the statutes. Well, eventually, I think the judges are going to wise up to it, and they're going to find the particular statute that I'm thinking about, which is the catch-all attorney fee statute, which makes it very easy for judges to award attorney fees. The situation is very difficult when a parent is trying to do the right thing. They are ignored, they lose, and then they also have to pay a ton of money in attorney fees. That is different. I didn't go through that. That I can see why it would cause people to kill themselves, because when you take that, you're basically saying this person who's trying to protect their child has, and I'm not talking about there's another statute that says you can't harass and file baseless things. That's fine. That's fine with me. If a person's doing that, they should have to pay attorney fees. I talk about that in another video. I'm talking about just giving an attorney fee award to the prevailing party just because they prevailed, which in child custody cases is insanity because of the gigantic discretionary windows. Discretion makes it almost impossible to predict what the outcome is going to be. Sorry, let me clarify that. Wide latitude, tremendous amounts of discretion makes it almost impossible to determine what the outcome is going to be. There are reasonable amounts of discretion. This means that you could come to court with something that's actually an issue, but your judge just has a different opinion. Now you've lost, not because you were wrong, but because your judge just had a different opinion. And with these statutes in place now, they can say, since you didn't read my mind and know what my opinion is going to be, you're going to also have to pay $12,000. That is the stuff that I never went through. And if you're going through that, I'm really sorry. I don't know what you can do, because if you're in a state where they're going to say, no, we're not going to protect your child, and we're also going to break your back, your financial back, for even trying, that's so oppressive that I just don't even have, I can't even go into something with that when it comes to this video. The other angle is, I guess, the child support angle. There's a lot of parents who are under crippling child support amounts, and they don't know how to modify, and they don't know how to appeal. And that's something that I didn't have to go through either, because I was receiving child support. So the reason that I wanted to talk about these things is because I'm trying to say that you may be one of the viewers that I don't fully understand. And I want to give validity to what you're going through, but I also want to say this may not apply to you because I didn't go through that kind of oppression. To me, that's financial oppression. So there's other videos that I have for, to try and help people understand how to get around some of the financial strangleholds that the government will put a parent in, but this video isn't going to be one that I go into. I guess the least I can do is list some of them off. So the first one is child support, which mainly I want you to look at the deviations portion, because that's where they're going to really cripple you. The second one is filing an appeal, because judges screw up on child support, not all the time, but it does happen. And sometimes a parent just needs to file an appeal to fix the judge's mistake. That way they don't have to pay all this money and then end up living, in poverty land. And there's also writ petitions. Sometimes you'll have judges who will impose temporary awards for years, and they'll never impose a final award. You won't be able to appeal, and you won't know you can't do anything about it. Well, you can. That's done by writ petitions. And that also will explain that in some states you have to appeal contempt orders through that mechanism. Depends what state you're in and what the circumstances are. But contempt of court is another one that's important to watch, because there are some people who are under crippling child support awards, and they can't pay and that's different from choosing not to pay. And when they start getting hit with contempt of court, there's ways that they can defend themselves by saying, yeah, I didn't pay this, but it's not because I didn't want to or because I chose not to. It's because I literally don't make that much money. And so that's also another reason why I guess some people, some fathers that turn to suicide is because they end up getting jailed for a long time, and they just feel like nobody's listening to me. I'm having to pay 10 grand in child support, but I only make 3,000 a month, and I'm sitting in a cell. So as soon as I get out of the cell, I'm just going to end it. This is really terrible stuff that's occurring, and it's probably going to yellow flag my video, but that's the truth of the situation for people who are going through financial strangleholds, or they're dealing with a system that tells them, stop bothering us. We're going to financially sanction you every time you try. It's a very different system. If you're going through one of those states, please post it down in the comments below. Maybe there's just a handful of them. Maybe there's a bunch of them. But Nevada, prior to 2015, was very safe when it came to child attorney fee awards and child support. Post 2015, it's a little trickier now, and I talk about why in the video attorney fee equalizers. I think this is the best I can do with how to stay sane. I hope that this video is useful to people. I feel like for anyone who's not having to deal with the financial sanctions, it's probably a lot easier to deal with. It's probably going to be a lot more helpful. For those of you that are in one of the states that's not as friendly, at least post something down in the comments so we can have some awareness as to what states those are. Last thing I want to mention is feel free to post any other questions and comments you may have down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.